13th Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are in the traditional territory of the Snamo First Nation. Our clerk today is Ms. Sky Snellgrove. Today's Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will be held in accordance with Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for the agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name in the agenda item on the sheet. Members have been granted by the authority to join meetings electronically. I don't believe I see any. Oh, yes, we have Councillor Brown attending electronically, and I believe everybody else is in person. And Councillor Thorpe will be delayed, but will be arriving shortly. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Any late items, Ms. Snellgrove? No.
We have no late items.
The adoption of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Hammond, seconded by Councillor Eastmer. All in favor? Motion carries. Motion for the adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved by Councillor Prano, seconded by Councillor Manley. All in favor? And we're going to turn our next over to our reports. The first one being Community Wellness and Livability, and this is going to be introduced by Mr. Dale Lindsay, our General Manager, Development Services, and our Deputy CAO.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have this item on your agenda, and I'm going to turn it over in a moment to Ms. Brinkman to introduce it and for the rest of the team to walk through it with you. I do recognize through the chair that you do have a number of items on your agenda, so we are hoping to allocate about 30 minutes this afternoon to this topic and this discussion, just so Council has that in mind when we're going through. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Ms. Brinkman.
Thank you. Through to the chair. So in 2022, the City of Nanaimo was selected by Public Safety Canada to receive $1.8 million over a 4-year period for the purpose of supporting programs to build a safer community through gun and gang violence prevention. So we are currently in year 1, and the purpose of today is to provide an update on the project and invite discussion. The Building Safer Communities Fund is intended to be used to address factors that put youth at risk of entering into gun and gang violence, find ways to support resilience among youth, and for youth that may not have an extended family, create a community that can be the extended family of supports for vulnerable youth. In July 2022, Council passed a motion endorsing the use of Year 1 funds to build a 3-year strategic plan. The strategic plan process is underway and will be presented to Council in March of this year for consideration of endorsement. And then following that, it does need to go to Public Safety Canada to meet our funding guidelines. So since July 2022, staff have submitted the required funding application and secured a contribution agreement with Public Safety Canada. We've been collaborating between departments, including community planning, the RCMP, as well as Parks, Rec and Culture, who are uniquely positioned to support youth. And we've selected a qualified consultant to assist the city in building the strategic plan. We've hired a recreation coordinator to assist with the program and commenced consultation with stakeholders in the community. And if after today's presentation you would like more information or would like to reach out to staff or the consultants, you can find contact information on the Building Safer Communities website on the city's page on the city's website. So the past few months have been quite busy, and Mr. Johnson from Parks, Recreation and Culture will tell you a bit more about what staff have been and the consultants have been doing. And then Ms. Wood will share more about what we mean by risk factors and explain the community consultation process. And also Ms. Sadler, who's from the consultant team, is available virtually and is also here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Brinkman. Good afternoon. My name is Damon Johnston, Manager of Recreation Services. Thank you very much for your time today. Parks, Recreation and Culture is very excited to be collaborating with the Planning Department, the RCMP, and the community on the Building Safer Communities project. I will be providing an overview and update of the Building Safer Communities project activities that have been undertaken since Council endorsed the funding in July of last year. The project team has had a tremendous amount of work since receiving the funding, and I can say that the success to date is a result of the interdepartmental collaboration between the city staff, the consultant team, and the community. So what I'd like to take you through is just a sort of a glimpse back to summer of last year and talk a little bit about the work activities that have been accomplished. In summer of last year, a work plan for the project was created and submitted to Public Safety Canada. A request for proposal was released seeking a consultant to create a guns and gang violence prevention strategy. In fall of last year, the city engaged the Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention to develop a guns and gangs prevention strategy. The project committee was also formed and is made up of city planning staff, Parks, Recreation and Culture staff, community policing, and of course our consultants. A job posting for a recreation coordinator was released and since then has been filled by Carrie Christensen. Ms. Christensen will be supporting the work of the steering committee and developing and implementing a public education and awareness campaign to engage youth, parents, and the community to bring awareness to both risk factors and the protective factors associated with gun and gang violence. So fast forwarding to this year, the winter, a steering committee was created and is made up of partners from a diverse range of sectors from our community. The role of the steering committee is to support the following: a strategic planning process, which will take us to March 31st of this year, support a public awareness, education of gun and gang violence prevention, support the education, outreach, and recruitment of vulnerable youth for prevention initiatives, identify priorities for the implementation, and support the implementation of the strategic plan. The first meeting was held in January with the steering committee, and there's another one planned for March 1st. Another major part of the Building Safer Communities project that is well underway are the public consultations. And I'm pleased to say that those are being very well received by the community. The information collected in the consultations will be used to shape and ground the strategy in a very local context. This project, since its endorsement from council, has been a very ambitious timeline, there's no question. But I think the team here is very committed and confident that we're going to achieve all of our outcomes. So just thinking about what we have ahead of us to complete. The first thing is to complete the community consultations by February 24th. Complete the draft gun and gang violence prevention strategy for council's review in mid-March. Submit the final strategy to Public Safety Canada on March 31st. And that review is expected to take upwards of 90 days. If the strategy is approved, the implementation will begin in the summer of this year with the second allotment of funding of $648,000. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the development and implementation of a public awareness and education campaign will roll out the spring of this year. And thank you very much for your time today. That's all I have to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Brinkman and Mr. Johnson. Before I kind of roll in, it's really important to note that although Public Safety Canada kind of uses this term gun and gang violence, the fund objective is really to support communities in addressing local risk factors to help our youth and support resiliency so that youth can grow up healthy, safe, and happy. So that's just a really important thing to note. So working upstream actually means underlying the causes of gun and gang violence by reducing risk factors for youth, as well as increasing what we call protective factors for youth. So that includes looking at the individual level, the family level, the peer level, the school level, and the societal level. So we share this video when we do our consultations with different groups and key stakeholders because, you know, to solve gun and gang violence, it's pretty complex. So we're talking about this term called upstream. And so this video is just a really short video that sums up what upstream means. So if we can just play that, please.
We tend to look at crime by focusing on individuals and their failings. When we ignore the many factors that shape people's attitudes, choices, and actions, we limit our ability to prevent crime from happening in the first place. A broad understanding of why crime happens brings prevention into focus. People's actions don't happen in isolation. Our environment plays a key role in how we behave. Early life experiences, the health of the community, opportunities for recreation, employment, social norms, as well as income and housing are just some of the factors that are connected to crime. By shifting upstream and getting closer to the source of the problem, we improve many more lives than by just focusing on the individual. Upstream prevention means we create an environment in which all people have a range of opportunities to grow, to learn, to work, to play, to connect, and to love and be loved. By working upstream, we increase the chances that everyone can reach their potential. This, in turn, goes a long way in reducing crime. A lot more upstream prevention leads to better long-term results and decreases the need for reactive measures. Creating an environment in which everyone can reach their potential is possible, and we all have a role to play. So let's make prevention matter. Learn more at www.preventingcrime.ca.
So that video was actually taken from a community, Waterloo, who did similar work. So we want to thank you and recognize them for that. And I think this video also really explains that we're not going to solve this issue through enforcement. We've got to work upstream. So that's what that video.
We tend to look at crime.
So this is just a list of example risk factors that we provide as we've been kind of doing our consultations out in the community. These are just examples. And these risk factors are actually based on evidence and best practices through other research and other work that's been done in communities. So the strategy is going to actually work to identify local risk factors that are prevalent for our youth here in Nanaimo. And this, I believe you got this in your package. So these are just some of the examples for you to think about. This slide provides a little bit of an overview of our protective factors, or what we call resiliencies. So we know that we have many youth in our community that have a number of risk factors, but they don't engage in criminal behavior, or they don't join a gang. Why? It's because they have protective factors that help them to reset the risk factors. So we want to know what protective factors we actually have in Nanaimo, where are the gaps, and how can we do better? So we're currently, as Ms. Brinkman and Mr. Johnson has relayed earlier, we're currently in the consultation phase with community members and key stakeholders. And it's important to note that although the City of Nanaimo has been identified to get these funds, this is a community-led strategy. So it's going to take all of us in the community. And so in addition to consultations with young people, Indigenous communities, organizations, our frontline workers, the consultants and staff would actually like to give council an opportunity to engage, to provide feedback on many ideas, concerns, or inputs that they may have into the strategy, and ideas on how we can prevent gun and gang violence in Nanaimo. So I'm just going to go over a few slides, and I know we're really short on time, so I want to be most efficient with your time. I just thought I'd cover some of the categories because I know you've gotten the questions prior to, and then maybe at the end we can kind of open it up for input or feedback or even questions that you might have for our consultants. So the first section, we really look at strengths. So we want to ensure that we capture the good work that's happening in Nanaimo right now and what youth programs are available. What are the programs that actually target our youth at risk, and which ones do we know are working well? With concerns, we want to know what are the risk factors for children and youth in Nanaimo specifically. What's unique to Nanaimo? What are our youth facing here in Nanaimo? And are there actually key locations of concern? And for opportunities and solutions, we've been asking, what are the ways that we can enhance programs that are working well? We know that Public Safety Canada won't fund existing programs, but if we know that some are working, we can enhance them or expand them to provide more support there. What new programs and initiatives that are rooted in evidence and best practices that we should bring to Nanaimo? Sustaining the momentum. How can we keep the momentum? We know that this funding ends in 2026. So how do we create that lasting change for our children and youth beyond this funding? And what role can we all play? And also part of the strategy is developing an evaluation and monitoring plan. So this is going to actually help us create a bit of a baseline where we can measure if the strategy has been successful. So part of the question that we've been asking is, what indicators do we know that the strategy has been successful? And after the 3 years of funding, how will we know that we've been successful, and how do we carry that on? So at this point, I want to do less talking and hear from you. Just a reminder, we also have our consultant online, so if we have any direct consultants for any questions for the consultants, please let us know, but we're also here to answer any questions and just collect comments and feedback.
I don't think your thing is working. Our mics aren't working. Okay, you want to push your button again? No, still not. Okay, now, Councillor Perino.
Thank you so much, Chair, and through you. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the strategy is to figure out what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong, and to build on what we're doing right. Is that correct?
That's basically, through the chair to Councillor Perino, that's the concept. The idea is to kind of capture what we're doing really well, what the risk factors are, and how can we increase the protective factors. And this will help us guide programs and initiatives that we would want to implement through years 2 and 4.
I think what I was thinking originally when I heard this was that we were going to be looking at the opportunities that we are giving people, families and children and so forth, but it's actually a step back from that, isn't it? It's not, we're not quite there yet of adding the actual programs, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Councillor Geselbrecht, and then Mayor Krog.
Thanks, Chair. Just curious, how involved is District 68 in this process?
Through the chair to Councillor Geselbrecht, they are a really important partner in this, and so we have both their senior leadership and 2 of their designated staff people participating on the steering committee. We have Brett Hancock, who is with the Learning Alternatives Program, and so they're integral to this process. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. I just in a follow-up, once this strategy is created, is there going to be some of the funding for programs, or would there be recommendations for further programs involved? I just wasn't 100% clear.
Thank you. Through to the chair, we see potentially both happening. So supporting things that are working in the community, that's what we're learning about right now, and then what are the gaps and what do we need to create or support moving forward.
And so sorry, just to follow up with that, if there are gaps, or if they're like, we've got current programs that are providing benefit, but they need to be enhanced in whatever capacity, is the funding just for identification of that, or is there money available to put towards those programs to enhance them or develop more, or is that a separate thing?
Through to the chair, will be money available to support those programs. So, yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, and I have,
Hang on.
sorry,
Mayor Krog.
through the chair, sorry, my apologies. I have a little thing going on with my right ear, so I don't hear everything today, which may be a blessing for some people whatever. And my questions sort of follow on what Councillor Geselbrecht has had to say. I mean, do we foresee hiring staff through the city on a semi-permanent basis to deal with this over the long haul? Or are we looking at basically being the distribution point for the funding to existing organizations and or other entities?
Through to the chair, it's early in the planning process, creating the strategic plan, but my sense so far is that it's more for supporting organizations in the community, not so much hiring of city staff necessarily, but Lisa may want to add.
Through the chair, if I could also add, I think there's an element here that may, as we work with the steering committee, look at what we do as a city through our recreational programs that could potentially pivot. I can't speak yet because we've yet to get that feedback. So we have opportunities within the business we already provide, but a good part, as Ms. Brinkman said, is to look at what our partners are doing.
Thank you very much.
Director Manley, or sorry, Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'm just wondering about what data we have and statistics we have in terms of identifying where we already have youth at risk or where the problems lie, what has worked and what hasn't worked in the past. Is there information on that?
Yeah, I can, through the chair to Councillor Manley, I can let you know that part of the strategy is developing a best practice summary. So that's one of the roles that consultants is playing for us, is kind of pulling what other communities are doing specific to this work. We also, are definitely tapping into local data that we have here. So whether that's looking at stuff like census data, but also working with our local, now correct me if I get this acronym wrong, but it's CFSCU. It's the Combined Forces of Special Enforcement Unit. I think I got that. Okay. So they're a provincial body, but they do specific work here in Nanaimo. So they're also going to be pulling some statistics for us that are kind of related to gun and gang violence. And then through the consultations, we're also collecting, anecdotal data, but we're also collecting data from organizations that may be able to share related to youth resiliency or youth risk factors.
Are there particular parts of town that we'd be focusing on? I know we have some of the lowest income areas in this school district in the province. And I know that there's some correlation, in the video as well, based on opportunities for young people in some of these poorer neighborhoods that could be enhanced or built upon. I know some of the schools in these poorer neighborhoods are actually some of the best schools in the district because there's a real focus there, but I'm just wondering if there are particular areas of town that we're going to be focusing on.
Well, through the chair to Councillor Manley, you raised a really good point. So last week, and I might let Christiane speak after me just to provide a bit of an update, we did have our consultants come to town and we did several site visits. We actually took reservist Constable Gary O'Brien out with us, who's been policing in the community for almost 30 years. And we just kind of went around different neighborhoods and just shared, information that we got from city staff about where some of the challenges are and, looked at societal factors like poverty and crime in particular neighborhoods. And that will be included as part of the data. But Christiane, did you want to maybe add a comment or some observations?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Christy. Just to say that the consultations are still ongoing, as Mr. Johnson intimated, until February the 24th. We did have a field study and some site visits. And most importantly, we're speaking as broadly to your community as possible, not only to collect data, but also to sort of get a feel for the culture of the community of Nanaimo that is surrounding your children and youth. It would be premature for me to sort of speak about specific neighborhoods. All of this will be in the report, which isn't finalized at this point, but suffice it to say that whenever we're dealing with children at highest risk, we're dealing with inequities. And so if there are geographies within the city of Nanaimo that are sort of feeling the harm of poverty more than others, that would be likely that those would feature in the report as areas to focus on. So I hope that helps somewhat with that question. And maybe if I might for 2 seconds while I have your attention, I just wanted to sort of share a couple of things coming out of the consultations. One is I need to give a shout out to your staff. They're just the most terrific team to work with, and it's been a pleasure and continues to be a pleasure. And secondly, what we're finding, and this will come as no surprise to you, that as we're asking questions about what puts children at risk, we're learning a lot about what puts the community at risk in the sort of broader context in which child behavior and youth behavior happens. And what Nanaimo is experiencing is what most sort of growing urban centers are experiencing. What you also have is a community that has a strong commitment to the future and future generations. I heard a lot in the consultation about hopefulness. I heard a lot about people wanting to be engaged, roll up their sleeves to get on with the work. And so all of that is incredibly encouraging for the complexity of the work that lies ahead of you. As I've said, and I'll end there, in some consultations, hope is not a plan. It's helpful to have. And so I hope that this plan will sort of put you in a great place as a catalyst for changes in the community, not only over the next few years, but beyond that time frame as well.
Thank you. Councillor Hammonds.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure where to start. Is the next round of funding contingent at all upon new programming emerging as a result of the consultation? And I'll give context to that question. I'm a little concerned that we have nonprofits and the school district and groups and research and a ton of people committed to youth in this community who are doing amazing work. And I can see how this consultation could be really complementary to that. But I worry that we might be creating another stream of work for those folks who are already doing that work. And so I'm just, dreaming here, what if the results of this consultation said, you have 3 major underfunded nonprofits in the community? Would the parameters of the funding allow us to, and I know that it gets tricky with nonprofit, but if we have a nonprofit focused on youth housing or health in schools and our results just say, keep doing that good work, are we going to be able to use the funds for that work?
Exactly. Through the chair to Councillor Hemmons, that's a really good question. We are kind of bound by the funding parameters of Public Safety Canada. And so we have great reps that we've been working with, and they understand that some of the limitations of that funding. And so what we've been told is that we can enhance or expand programs. So for instance, if a program was dedicated to children 8 to 12, but we really see a need for that same program from, like, say 12 years to 16, then that would be considered an expansion or enhancement. And then the other thing is to bring in new programs. And so they don't fund straight up, just provide extra operational funding to an existing program. Hopefully, yeah.
Okay, I guess it's me next. I have a couple points, having worked in this area quite a lot. We went through this in 2012, 2013, the exact same thing on guns and violence and gangs here in Nanaimo. And we found and I've seen it in my practice as well, as the majority of our gang members here come from affluent neighborhoods, not poor neighborhoods, contrary to what a lot of people think. I said many of our gang members came from affluent neighborhoods. It depends on what type of gangs you're looking for. You've got your organized crime gangs and you've got your street level gangs, so you need to look at that. But I mean, you take a look at the Red Scorpions, which started in Nanaimo with affluent family members. So I think that's something we have to be cognizant of, not always think that it comes from poorer backgrounds, depending on the type. Second point, I agree exactly with what Councillor Hemmons said. We've got some very, very good programs here which remain underfunded and shut down. There was a program at Fairview School which was identified as a high-risk school that didn't get the funding, and that was done by Constable Sherry Wade, if you need any more information on that. And going to Councillor Manley's point, what are our youth stat crimes? We need that from the detachment, and where are they happening and what type of crimes? Are we talking about smaller crimes like minimal assaults, or is it harassment online? Like, I think we need to know what type of crimes are happening so that we know how can we address those points. And then the other places that have there's 3 places that come to mind that have excellent programs for youth gangs and violence, and that's Regina, Winnipeg, and Surrey, where Surrey had the program, I don't know if you're probably aware of it, Ms. Wood, which was an amazing program that got so many kings out of gangs. And then again, the funding dried up. So I really struggle with Public Safety Canada trying to deal with the problem when they're not funding these groups that are really working well. So I think that should be a recommendation, that we have some great programs, like NYSAW is one that comes to mind right off the bat, that is really working hard with these youth and struggles for funding. So I just want to thank everybody, and I think we did it in 30 minutes, less actually, it was 28, so thank you very much. Unless there's other questions, and I don't see any, so that's great, thank you. And thank you to our consultant for being here, and we look forward to your report.
Thank you very much.
So our next one is Governance and Management Excellence, and it's supposed to be introduced by Ms. Gurry, but I'm assuming that's you, Ms. Snellgrove?
Ms. Gurry is on the line.
Oh, Ms. Gurry, didn't see you, I apologize.
No worries, I just turned my camera on. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Council. It's nice to be here today, even if it's virtual. I apologize for not being in person. I've just come down with quite a flu, and which is unfortunate because I've been really looking forward to this day and this presentation. So I'm going to do my best, but I might rely a little bit more heavily on Ms. Snellgrove and Ms. Bonigal who are there for me today. And so, without further ado, we have 5 reports from me and 4 that will be covered in this presentation. And we'll go through each report and the purpose as well as the slides. And they're limited slides because what we're really looking for today is some feedback. And we have some fun polls for you to do, which is why I've had you all join Zoom today. So thank you so much for being good sports and participating. Because really the idea is to get some interactive feedback from you all, and going forward we can come back with some real recommendations that should, I hope, reflect the feedback we received today, that we already have received, and that after you have your strategic priorities and set your priorities for your term, we can come back with some meaningful terms of reference for the Governance and Priorities Committee, as well as many other any other task force committees or types of engagement that you wish to have. So the first report on Governance and Priorities Committee, the purpose is to provide an overview of the current Governance and Priorities Committee GPC structure, and to present options for discussion and feedback that will guide future amendments to the GPC's terms of reference. So going forward in the slides, I kind of already did the overview. And next, this is the outline of the 4 reports that we will be going. So next we're on to the GPC. So we'll just start here. And the GPC, as most of you know, was established in 2019 to enable members of council to review upcoming and important issues and opportunities with members of administration and the public, with a focus on the understanding of the broader policy implications of the items being considered. It provides an opportunity for in-depth discussion and conversation on council priorities, and it was originally intended to be more informal forum with open dialogue. So I think, as all of you are aware, this GPC has been a work in progress. It's a new form of governance that this council, the previous council, was brave enough to try out, and I think it's been a work in progress over the years, and I think there's been some very good examples of good meetings, and I think we could keep endeavoring to make them better. So with some feedback today and some ideas that staff has had, we would like to get your feedback on that. So the next slide speaks to what staff is proposing. And so staff is proposing, or was thinking of, a way to have council or the GPC committee find different ways of engaging with the public that would help collect and provide council with community input in advance of GPC meetings. So previously we had come up with a list of priorities. Council GPC members had come up with a list of priorities, and there was rankings to them. And we did have them kind of listed and slotted in advance as to when we would try to bring them forward for your discussion. But what staff have thought is more of an agenda planning priorities, similar to what you previously have done, but in advance of them coming to a GPC meeting for your discussion, we were thinking of putting them on Bang the Table and getting some community input in advance of the GPC meetings. And this strategy seeks to broaden and encourage community input. Oh, previous slide, sorry, Natalie. Go back one. Thank you. And support a number of the community engagement task force recommendations, which I'll speak to in just a minute. And it increases the use of Get Involved Nanaimo, which is Bang the Table, our public engagement software, and other channels. So the next slide. So here is kind of an example of the flow that we see it working, how it would work. Council identifies strategic priorities. The agenda planning sets topics for a year ahead, but we were thinking more realistically it would be 6 months that we could kind of come up with topics based on your priorities after you have your sessions and kind of work through. I think 6 months is probably more realistic, and a year might be too ambitious. And then we would put these topics on Get Involved Nanaimo, and we could do surveys and collect community feedback on selected topics. Then they would come to the GPC meeting, and the topics would align with the agenda planning schedule, which was the second item on this flow chart. And then recommendations from the GPC would go to council, and there'd be communication opportunities as well. So the next slide. So the Community Engagement Task Force, this task force had its first meeting in 2017 and brought its recommendations to the previous council in January of 2019. Council of the day received these recommendations for information, and staff and council, I believe, has endeavored to try to incorporate these recommendations into many of our engagement tools that we have done, and we can do a better job, I think, endeavoring or trying to implement some more of them. So one example coming up, and I'll speak to a little bit later, is World Cafe with neighborhood associations that is being planned for this spring. That was one of the engagement task force's opportunities that they had, and was very successful with the neighborhood associations. So some of their recommendations, 4 of the 6 of them, I think really would fit into the GPC and what we're proposing, where the recommendations say being committed to working more closely with the community to improve engagement and participation in council decisions so that residents feel empowered to be more active in shaping their community and future. And beginning with something simple, such as a published calendar of what council intends to engage residents about over the next year. So that would go with our agenda planning for like a 6-month calendar. Ensuring that the existing methods for community engagement are fully understood and utilized. So there we have Get Involved Nanaimo, Bang the Table. It was heavily utilized during Reimagine Nanaimo, but we can definitely utilize and get the full bang for the buck for Bang the Table that I think we could do much more. And also consider how to improve community engagement through advertising, social media, and online technology, which again, this would kind of align with and we would be endeavoring to do more of. And the next slide. So now it's time for a check and poll. So what we have done, and to make this a little bit interactive, is based on the information in the Governance and Priorities Committee report, as well as what we heard from you back in December on the 12th regarding our Governance and Priorities Committee meetings. We'd like to ask a few questions and get a poll, just so we can have a little bit more accurate data of where council's at in terms of how many of you feel a certain way opposed to another. We'll take this feedback as well as what we hear in your strategic priorities meetings that you'll be having in the next little while and come back to you with some recommendations. So this is the fun part. So we're going to do some poll. After the poll questions are done, it would be a great time for you to have discussion or further questions, whatever, about how the poll results show up and come in. So the first question, hopefully you can all see this, time of day. So what time of day do you prefer for GPC meetings?
I know what yours will be.
So currently they're 1 to 5. So if that is your preference, that would be your selection. Evening, which would be 7 to 10. And the reason we chose 7 to 10 is that it's after the dinner hour. Yet still allows enough time for some fulsome discussion. They wouldn't have to go till 10, but that's the reason for the 7 p.m. start time. And alternating is an option where you could have one daytime, one evening option. So that's kind of the feedback we were hoping to get from you. If you could just select one and then click submit.
We're all done.
It's Ian.
Sorry, I was thinking carefully before I made my choice.
Good job.
Interesting. Awesome. Did anybody want to have any discussion on that? Did the committee want to discuss that at all? So we have 56% say daytime, which is where it's currently at. 22% say evening, and it's a tie at alternating 22%.
Well, seeing nobody else, I'll just say my concern is, that's why I voted for evening, is when I heard from many public that they can't come during the day because they work. So I think if we're talking about public engagement, maybe we need to hear from the public what time works best for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Perino?
You know, it was, I was torn between the alternating, because I prefer the daytime only because it allows us to have more of the staff here. And we want to make sure that when we are discussing issues that we've got the staff who know what is actually going on. So that was important to me. However, I'd certainly be an advocate of, once a month or once every 2 months, once a quarter, or whatever, to do an evening meeting to engage the public as well. So I'm certainly keen to that.
Thank you, Councillor Perino, and Councillor Geselbrecht.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm interested in looking sort of at GPC as needed basis and having it available in the morning and day depending on the nature of the discussion, because I think there are some cases where having an evening session would facilitate having certain members of the public be there and sort of generate more of that input that we're looking for. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Chair, I would just like to add to some of that feedback that we've been hearing just in the fourth report, other committees and engagement opportunities. I will be talking about the idea that came up at the December 12th GPC about the quarterly town halls, which might kind of assuage some of the information, as well as if we do utilize Bang the Table and hear from the public, that is an alternate way of them engaging as well as attending meetings. That might be a preferred way of engagement for some members of the public, but that definitely could be something we ask them on the survey as well.
And going to Councillor Thorpe, and then we'll have Councillor Brown. Thanks, Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. No, I just wanted to quickly say that I think Councillor Geselbrecht just made a really good point. It sort of depends on the topic of the GPC. If it's simply a workshop or an update from staff on certain projects, then during the day I think is most appropriate and preferable for me personally. But if it's something where we're getting more public involved, then possibly once in a while an evening one would be in order, and that would be fine as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Geselbrecht? Or sorry, Councillor Brown.
Terrible.
We look so much alike.
No, we don't. Thank you, Chair. I very much agree with Councillor Geselbrecht and Councillor Thorpe. I think the time of day should reflect the potential audience. Obviously, if it's just a meeting of council, that's a little different. If it's we're expecting to get some user groups or public at the table with us, then we should be a little more flexible in accommodating their schedules. But I would also, I think, throw out the idea that I think we should have less GPCs. They are very, I get the sense they're very resource intensive. It's another meeting that folks need to prepare for, often quite in-depthly. And I'm not sure that the value is always there when we have this just regular regime of meetings. I would rather see us potentially move to just one a month. And then we're really, I think, hopefully going to be structuring them better and spending those same resources to create a better meeting. So I don't know if that's something up for consideration. So I just wanted to put that out there as an idea. I think that often we're creating work to fill the meetings that could be more appropriately done with just a staff report to council on some topics, or on financial matters more appropriately sent to the finance and audit, and then really save space for council discussion as the GPC was really originally intended, and not loading it with topics and loading with presentation. Thank you.
Director Manley, or Jesus, I keep cheapers. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. I chose alternating for the reasons that have been given. I think that there's times when we're going to want the public these meetings to be more accessible to the public, and there's times when the public's not going to be interested in the overviews that we get. So that's why I chose that. I think being flexible is a good idea.
Thank you. Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. Yes, in the interest of being flexible, I did vote for daytime, but I think alternating does make more sense to me. So if I could change my vote, sorry, team.
So I think what I'm hearing, since there's no other speakers, is that everybody feels that there's a belief that we could use some evening topics, depending on what the topic is. Less meetings unless they're really meaningful for council to have engaged conversation, because some of the reports we could just read if we're not going to have questions. And there is a need for some daytime ones as well. Is that sum it up, Ms. Gurry, for you?
Yes, and I also, dependent upon the topic, I think was a good point made as well, that some topics, depending on the engagement with the public, would be better had in the evening. So similar to what you said. I think we got it.
Okay, seeing nothing further, I'll turn it back to you, Ms. Gurry.
Okay, and I think we have another question coming up. So this kind of talks to what we just talked about. So I think that we might, I don't know, let's see what you all say. You can vote on what frequency do you prefer the GPC meetings, bi-weekly or monthly? But I think I know what the answer might be.
So far monthly. Everybody in? Oh, sorry, we're just waiting for one. Some tech help, please? No, he doesn't have the poll. The poll's not there. His poll's not there. No, he's got it. Well done.
Again, thank you for your patience doing this. It's kind of fun though.
Okay, we're all in.
Awesome. So we got 67% are leaning towards monthly and 33% bi-weekly. Excellent.
Okay, we have one question from Councillor Hemmons.
Thanks, Chair. Less a question and more a comment, and that's just that when we have a meeting that it's important to have a meeting. And I recall in the last term, I don't think we had any GPCs that we canceled because we didn't have content. So if we are going to choose monthly, then we need to police ourselves in terms of the tasks we give staff to make those meetings run smoothly and be efficient for everyone. So I said bi-weekly just because last term I don't think we didn't have any GPC that we didn't have content to discuss, but that's not to say we couldn't have moved it somewhere else. But so wherever we land on this, I want to emphasize that efficiency is important. Thanks.
Councillor Geselbrecht.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, someone on the same lines as Councillor Hemmons. I think that having like a set schedule of monthly can work, but I do like the idea of having sort of the option for as needed. So say, for example, we come to a period where there's just a lot of issues that we need to sit down and chat about, that we can, book in maybe another session during the month to get that done, so we're not waiting 6 months to have a discussion that we need to have. And that might allow for meetings that, require potentially less staff preparation and more just council discussion to be able to discuss and get into the weeds a bit on an issue that, to get some discussion going. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Mr. Rudolph and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of thoughts about how GPC got set up. And this is related to your committee conversation later on. Part of the narrative before was maybe fewer committees and more of the work being done by all of council. And it was a new council and it was a majority of new councillors. So the thinking was in part that everybody's in the tent having those conversations instead of carving it up. So there's a bit of that was going on. The second thing is, and this I think is relevant, during the course of the first 6 months of your term or so, there's probably a need for more meetings to just go over the landscape and some of those big topics. I'm just thinking of the city plan, for example, where we have all those chapters to work through, and I don't know if one a month would do it. You might need more time. So, and then the third piece, I guess, is if we go to once a month, we still may want to protect those dates in your calendars in case it comes to being that you want to have those days for meetings. And I guess the last point, and this has come up earlier, and we really haven't dwelled on this, people want to engage online nowadays. They're not so much attending meetings. And so this whole idea of inserting that possibility into all of your GPCs in advance is something that we shouldn't overlook. You may have user groups and various interested parties come to particular meetings, but if you've noticed, even since COVID, the attendance at council meetings has been pretty light. But I think there's still a lot of people following online and through that medium. So I think you really need to think of that as well as part of your engagement strategy here. So Ms. Curry's tried to visit that subject with you just to see. I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt to get engagement in advance of the meeting, but to expect people to attend may not necessarily be what people are wanting to do anymore.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. I think all good points there. I chose monthly for a couple of reasons. Although I agree that we filled the meeting time last term, I'm not always sure that the value was there in the outcome for the amount of time spent, both in meetings, but also undoubtedly the amount of staff time that would take to prep those. And so I think being a little more thoughtful and discerning when we pick the topics to have at GPC, we can really carve out that time for robust dialogue. And I think that really was, at least when it came to my vote, was sort of the founding intention of the GPC, was making sure there was adequate time for really robust debate on topics that deserved it. And I think about the pace in which we had them in the content, and I'm not sure we always left room for that robust debate on deserving topics. And the second thing I think is, at the end of the day, any committee and any meeting schedule of council is ours to own. And so if there is a particular topic that appears on a council agenda or is an emerging topic, we have all the powers in the world within our procedure bylaw to have a council meeting or have any committee meeting, or this finance and audit with GPC to discuss that. So I think we have the tools in our toolbox to recognize those issues. And if we're focused on that, having one meeting a month is good. I think Mr. Rudolph makes a great point about maybe just making sure there's some carving out of the schedule, just in case there is those emerging issues. But yeah, so my preference would be when we schedule them, it's once a month. And then we've also preserved a potential Monday for those emerging issues if we need to use it. And I will note, at the RDN, we did the same thing with the cow. And it's been very rare that a cow has ever been held. So it does force, I think, some good thoughtfulness around when you utilize that time to have those meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Geselbrecht, and then Perino.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think just on the frequency of the GPC, some of this decision making will be informed what we decide to do with committees. Say, for example, if there's thought of being able to touch base on the different elements of the city plan. I know there's in the past there's been the environment committee, but if we wanted to look at other ones that will help track the action plans, maybe just doing it all through the GPC might be the best way, as opposed to creating more committees. But I think that'll be informed later on in this discussion. Thank you.
Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, a question through to you. If we have committees, where does the committee discussion come to council? Is it at the regular council meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so, it's an interesting thought, because I tend to think of, and I could be wrong, so feel free to correct me, the GPC meetings tend to be a little less formal, which I like for more open discussion, right? Because we're not quite so time restricted, but I certainly agree with Mr. Rudolph that we should schedule in those other dates just in case we need them. I never mind doing that. If somebody says the meeting's canceled, fine. You've always got other things to do. And I don't mind if we do it monthly and it happens to be an all-dayer. I don't mind that either if we do that. I know that's not a preference, but I'm just saying I'm not adverse to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, I'll just say I concur with Councillor Brown. I know there was times we struggled to find topics for the GPC. So I think because we did so many before and we've got a lot of good, robust ones in, and some of them to me were a waste of time because we could have just read the reports. There wasn't any questions on a lot of them. So I think, as was stated by others, we have to be really concerned about which topic we pick. Is it going to encourage robust discussion? Because if it's not, then you may as well just send me a report. That's my 2 cents. Thank you. And moving on now, Ms. Gurry, to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I just want to say thanks to Mr. Rudolph. Those were really good points that I should have made. And my sick head right now isn't totally working. Just one comment on what I think he said, and maybe Councillor Brown, is I think once your priorities are determined, depending on the list, that'll kind of allow for us to know how many meetings might actually be necessary and in what format they're dealt with. So that'll be another thing to help answer these questions and bring back recommendations for you. Okay, so next, do we have another question, you all, or, yeah, so location. So this has been, since COVID, we have met, all our GPC meetings have been held at the conference center. However, when they originally were created back in 2019, the location was set at the Service and Resource Center, otherwise known as the SARC. And that was to allow for more informal sessions, etc. So we are just looking at what your preference might be, and if you have a choice as to what you prefer and where you prefer our meetings to be held. If you like them to stay at the Vancouver Island Conference Center, or if you would like them to be at the Service and Resource Center boardroom. And there might be times, and depending on topic matter, where one location might not work over the other, and they might have to be at the conference center. But overall, the choice is councils, and we'd like to know what you prefer.
Are we all in? Who are we waiting on? Who's not in?
There we go.
Pardon? We're all in?
They've all been submitted now.
Well, that's close. So we have 44% would prefer them to be at the Vancouver Island Conference Center, and 56% would like them to be at the Service and Resource Center. And if you wish to have any discussion about that, Chair.
Councillor Geselbrecht?
Thanks, Chair. I did like the Service and Resource Center boardroom. It just seemed a little bit more amenable to chatting about things. However, I have been very grateful and appreciative of the ability to do hybrid meetings. Just sometimes with childcare and things like that, it is nice to be able to zoom in and still participate fully. And I'm just curious what the Service and Resource Center boardroom, I think there was a few hybrid committee meetings out there from the Environment Committee, and it seemed to be pretty seamless, the meetings, or is it a bit more tricky to have a hybrid?
Ms. Snellgrove?
Yep, through the chair. So we do have the same streaming and recording capabilities in the boardroom as we do at the conference center.
I will add, though, we had lots of issues with it at the SARC this year, or last year.
And just to follow up, what is the cost difference between doing it in the SARC as opposed to doing the Vancouver Island Conference Center?
Chair, I'm not sure if Mr. Corson is there or Mr. Rudolph, but the prices are about to change for our bookings for our meetings down at the conference center. So there's going to be a little bit of a reduction in the price we pay for our council meetings to be held there. So it would definitely be less expensive to have them at the Service and Resource Center, though cost really isn't the major driving factor that I think you should contemplate. I think it's the type of meeting and location. And there was some upgrades done to the boardroom with new screens and microphones, etc. So there has been some updates done there. However, I'm not sure if all of the kinks have been worked out yet.
Mr. Corson?
It's around $500 savings.
And is it fair to say that we have to subsidize here anyhow, so we may as well get value for the dollar, which I think the public would prefer?
Yes, so you can pay the money through this, or you can pay the money at the end of the year in terms of the subsidies. So it's.
We just put a board table here.
Mayor Krogh?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm for the Goldilocks option, frankly. This room's too big and formal, and the other one's too small and informal. But I'm not anxious to spend money on either, so that's why, candidly, I opted for the conference center. In terms of being able to broadcast the proceedings, so to speak, record them, I think this is the more logical place. If someone wanted to phone in to SARC, it's always a huge issue. The video aspect of it, it just doesn't work effectively. And particularly if we're going to have a larger GPC, for instance, I mean, it just strikes me that this is the place. It's not perfect, but I'm not anxious to spend money on something else.
Councillor Perino?
Thank you, Chair. And just my understanding is that both of the meetings, whether they're here or at SARC, are in fact live to the public. Is that correct? I think for the professional nature of we just tend to be careful, more careful about, behavior, and I think that's important. So I put for SARC, but given what Mayor Krog has said and the fact that this room is already paid for by doing it here, so I would change my vote to the VICC.
Councillor Thorpe?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I agree with the mayor as well. And we're paying for this facility. It's a beautiful facility. It's a little more comfortable, and it does accommodate more people when we have those kind of meetings, and it also gives us the Rispin room for in-camera sessions when we need that as part of our GPC. So, I don't mind the SARC building, but I think this is a more appropriate venue.
Seeing no other speakers, I too voted for the conference center. I think it's much better, even when you look at it from a health and safety perspective. You're not spitting across against each other, which does happen. We've seen it. And also if there's crowds, well, when you're cognizant of that, and also the fact that it's much easier to hear staff and see staff. People don't have to move about. We've got all the good cameras here, which don't always work at SARC. And also that room can be used by SARC, or used by staff on Mondays instead of us, which I think opens up more opportunities as well. So for me, also when I go to the professionalism, it looks much more professional here than sitting around a little board table. Thank you. Ms. Gurry?
Thank you. I think that might be the last question. Not sure. Oh, no. So, do you support the engagement idea that was spoken about earlier of having that public schedule of GPC agenda topics posted in 6 months in advance based on council's strategic priorities? So this would be that engagement tool where the topics would be posted, and then we would allow for public engagement on our Get Involved Nanaimo site. I think this is an easy
Everybody
one.
in? No. Oh, we've got 2 more to go, so it's not easy. Could change. Oh. Everybody in? There we go.
All the answers have been submitted, yeah.
Here you go, Ms. Gurry.
So 63% yes and 13% no and 25% neutral. So is there any discussion on that or further feedback?
Thanks, Chair, and I apologize. Maybe I missed some rationale for this when I was late for the meeting today. I voted no simply because I thought we were talking about having more flexibility in arranging our GPC meetings as needed, and I didn't see that this gave flexibility. So I can be convinced the other way by other people's comments.
Well, seeing no others, I'll go first then. One of the reasons that I chose for yes is because if we did have this up on our website and we saw that there was a real lot of public interest in some of the topics, then we could maybe have that as an evening meeting where the public could come to it. So that was one of the reasons I looked at doing it for that, to see how much interest is there in the topics, plus then it gives us time to think about, where we're going, et cetera, or if there's groups we want to let notify that now this is coming up instead of just finding out about it one day in advance or 1 week. So that's my rationale. Seeing no other speakers? Councillor Braun?
Yes, Chair, just to add to that quickly, Councillor Thorpe, at the start we were talking about ways to implement and with the Community Engagement Task Force recommendations that came about in 2019, one of the recommendations that they presented to Council was to further utilize our online engagement tools. So what staff were proposing and wanting feedback on today was if we use the Get Involved Nanaimo or Bang the Table software to, in advance, see what the public has input on for those topics, we could then bring that feedback and topic information back to the GPC meeting ahead, like at the time that the topic is being discussed. So getting that feedback in advance, using our online engagement software, using the surveys, etc., and that's what it was about. And is this question, did we already have this question? And I'm
No, hang on, we've got more speakers. Councillor Hemmons and then Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Gurry. I'm a little confused on the role of Bang the Table. Is it that Council will set GPC topics and then we'll ask for the public to rank them? Are we asking for public input on what topics they would like us to discuss? And yeah, just
So
clarity.
based on the way I understand it, and Ms. Snellgrove and Ms. Monagle, correct me if I'm wrong in the way I was interpreting how we were going to implement this or use this, is once council has set your priorities and what emerging issues and items that are important in your term that you want to focus on. Once you have set those, and there needs to be meetings or supporting information or work for staff or whatever to do, those items would be placed on an agenda up to 6 months in advance as to when and how we would talk about that. And then we would get public feedback where necessary, either by survey on these issues, if there were questions to ask, if they did have feedback on those topics, and get that feedback. If it supported the topic, if there was feedback to get, we would utilize Bang the Table and get more feedback prior to bringing the topic to the GPC meeting for discussion. I hope that sort of makes sense.
Okay, we're good. Natalie? No, we're just waiting for one more vote. I was just going to say our next question. Not everybody was there yet. Okay, anybody want to speak on this one? Not seeing anybody. Ms. Gurry?
No, I have nothing to add. So it is, do you support the proposed? And it was 89% in favor, I think, 11% opposed. So I think that was it for that one. So moving ahead, unless there's more feedback.
Nope.
Okay. So now on to maybe an easier one, the Mayor's Leaders Table. This report is on your agenda after discussions with the mayor and focusing on the recommendations from the Mayor's Leaders Table, as well as the previous Mayor's Task Force on Recovery and Resiliency. The Mayor's Leaders Table proposed new terms of reference, being called the Mayor's Leaders Table rather than the Table of Champions, is before council for feedback, or before the committee for feedback and amendments, which have been made. And I'm not sure if Mr. Sims and or Mr. Rudolph or Ms. Snellgrove have anything to add. She helped Mr. Sims and her wrote the report together. So if there's any information on that. Otherwise, the terms of reference have been drafted and are recommended that they go to council for approval.
Mayor Croak?
Thank you very much, Chair, and I just want to extend my thanks to the staff who've worked on this. Very much appreciated. You know, what is it? They'll line the mills, the gods grind slowly, but they grind exceeding fine. I think it's very important that this work be undertaken as soon as possible. I am happy with the terms of reference. I have in mind some folks already who I think were some of the more enthusiastic participants with the leaders table and the whole process, who I think are very anxious to continue with this. It would appear that the provincial government is opening up the coffers somewhat for projects, and so this would be a timely way to do it. And certainly a number of groups in the community are strongly supportive of the things that were identified during the course of the process as being the priority for the city. I see Councillor Perino nodding enthusiastically and optimistically. I can just only guess what she's thinking about, and I say that with respect and affection, not sarcasm. Having said that, I would appreciate, obviously, if Council will support the recommendations as set out before you. So I'll leave it at that. I'm sure Mr. Rudolph might have something to add, though.
Councillor Thorpe?
Thanks, Chair. I just wasn't sure, maybe I didn't read carefully enough. Membership will include the mayor and 5 to 7 additional members appointed by the mayor. Does that mean you're starting from scratch and appointing 5 to 7, or you're building on what was already there from last time?
Mayor Krog? Sorry. Hang on, I had to go here.
Sorry, no, we're not adding, gosh, we had 30 people around the table. No, we're talking a small, effective group.
Great, thank you. And I'll, if I can be...
Go ahead.
Oh, good, thank you. I thought it was really valuable work, and I would certainly support seeing it continued, and really pleased that you've backed away from the Breakfast of Champions label.
Mr. Rudolph?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So recall that when COVID hit, there was a task force set up with around 7 people. It's very focused. They generated recommendations, including a continuation of a mayor's leaders table, which was broader. That generated 3 subcommittees, one on the economic donut, which is really economics. We have the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation working through that implementation. One was on youth. We had a conversation today about youth. There's a fair amount of work going on in the youth realm right now. So the third one, which was possibly the biggest group, was the infrastructure ask group, which was a very robust. Mr. Sims was the principal supporter of that, and he's been in contact with the previous chair of that to see if there was an appetite to continue it. Actually, Ms. Hayes' comment was an expectation that there'd be some platform to be able to carry on the work that was started there. So that's the starting point, I think, in terms of this Mayor's Leaders Table initiative at this stage, is working from that group in particular. But I think anything could be on the table, so it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. But to have a smaller group of a cross-section of the community would be, I think, would be helpful for council to have a sounding board that's official in some capacity. So, and I believe it will evolve. You may refer matters to them. In a way, it's another committee.
Councillor Thorpe?
If there's no other questions or comments, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Perino. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion passes. Okay, Advisory Committee, Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Chair. So the next report is on the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness.
I have some issues on this.
So this committee was first established in 2019 to promote social and political equity within existing and proposed city plans, policies, bylaws, infrastructure, and make recommendations to ensure that they are inclusive and accommodating to citizens of all ages, abilities, and walks of life. So the committee that we currently have actually fulfills the new legislative requirement for organizations, including municipalities, to have an accessibility committee. So the BC Accessibility Act, which I believe comes into force in September, requires municipalities to have an accessibility committee, and it possibly may have already come into force, but regardless, we have already had this committee established since 2019. The previous council struck this committee, and it's been wildly successful. So the membership requirements just need to be adjusted slightly to ensure compliance with the legislation. Next slide. The proposed membership to comply with legislation, but to actually maybe bring up a notch the committee, even though, as I said, it's been extremely successful. The proposed membership is 13 voting members, of which there are 2 members of council, which is the same as it is now, 5 members appointed on behalf of nonprofit organizations dedicated to matters of accessibility, diversity, and/or inclusion, and this is new, 5 members at large, and 1 youth representative. So that's a new one as well. So currently the actual committee has all at-large members and 2 members of council. The new legislation requires a certain representative of Indigenous representation to be included, which we have listed there as well. But we previously did not have nonprofit organizations dedicated to matters of accessibility, diversity, or inclusion included in our terms of reference. So that is what we're proposing. Next slide. So as well, another consideration for you today, and it'll be one of your poll questions, is the city plan acts as the city's accessibility plan with implementation built into the integrated action plan. So the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness would be required to review and update the accessibility actions every 3 years in line with the new legislation. There is an opportunity to review city's plans empowered Nanaimo goals and identify opportunities to support the related policies. Staff will amend terms of reference based on your feedback today in return for endorsement. So that's why the terms of reference aren't before you in draft form today. We wanted some feedback on these changes. Next slide. I think now it's time for the poll questions. So I'm not sure if you have any
If I
questions
just-
prior to the poll questions, or
Yeah.
maybe do you want to see what
Yes,
the poll questions
Mayor Crowe,
are?
would you like to speak now?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. I just want to say, I'm going to state the obvious and gild the lily. I want to pay compliments, in particular Councillors Armstrong and former Councillor Martin. This was a very successful committee. I could be cheeky and suggest the provincial governments legislated this simply because they saw the good example set by the City of Nanaimo and the previous council in having this structure set up that has performed so well, and I wish it much success. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Are you going to be discussing on the polls the number of committee members, or do you want questions on that now?
So I believe, and Ms. Monagle can correct me if I'm wrong, that we do ask how you feel about the community right here. Do you
Okay, I'll
propose
wait
the
till then.
hybrid membership model?
Yep, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
No, we don't support that. Waiting for one, I believe. Okay, who would like to start the discussion? Anybody? Well, if not, then I'll start. Well, I don't see anybody. I have an issue with 13 members. I think that's far too many. The other issue that I have is that I don't think it should be all nonprofit the 5 nonprofits. We did have nonprofits represented on the last one. We struggled to fulfill even getting 5 to 6 members at the meeting, so I think 13 is far too many because I don't think we would ever get quorum if we had 13, so I'm concerned about those numbers. I would like to see the numbers of nonprofit drop down to 3. Thank you. Nobody else?
I think I see Councillor Brown.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I would very much agree with your comments, Councillor Armstrong. I would just say well, one, especially around the number reduction, but I actually don't think there should be a nonprofit requirement. I think part of due diligence as we seek committee members would be to solicit applicants through nonprofit organizations doing that type of work. But with respect to limiting ourselves to filling those slots with appointments, I just don't think is the overall best approach, and it can be handled a little differently and achieve the same ends where appropriate. So generally highly supportive of the committee. I think did amazing work. Yeah, just reduction in numbers and not have just all members at large, not the requirements for the nonprofits. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to note that I really like the connection of this committee, which I have found also wildly successful, to the empowered section in Reimagined, and I wondered if Akaya could chew on the challenge we have with how to measure public engagement, which falls, and political voice, which falls below Empowered Nanaimo.
Thank you. Councillor Geselbrecht?
I was just curious, what nonprofits were on there again?
Family Life Association was there, and there's another one from LGBTQ+. I can't remember the actual acronym. So there was there.
Right.
I think Nanaimo Association of Community Living was another one. Ms. Monagle would know. And just like a reminder to council, back in 2019, when you established this committee, we did have this conversation back then, and council ultimately voted not to have nonprofits as part of the membership. So it was just an idea that we thought we'd bring forward again to you. So do appreciate the feedback.
Great. I'm just curious. I didn't see it in the report, and maybe I missed. But what is the rationale to have the nonprofits as part of it? Is it to leverage their participation, or?
I believe it was to the people that are in the business and have that wide range of knowledge, in order for them to bring that feedback to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand, like, for some of these organizations that do represent a very diverse communities that often have difficulty or are underrepresented, it does provide access to a large network and a wealth of knowledge. And I would hope that these organizations, if we didn't go the route of having nonprofits, would apply to be on the committee. I think that it's in our best interest to solicit their participation, just because they're busy and they may miss the online request for application. So I do support having them included on the committee. If there's a problem having it informally, I think that it's in our best interest to actively solicit them to submit an application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Well, thank you, Chair. I would actually switch my vote based on what I've heard. I said yes initially, but I think that you know what you've had to say about how the committee runs, and then Councillor Brown's comments. I think that we want to ensure that we're encouraging these nonprofit organizations that are working with people with barriers and challenges to appoint somebody to apply. And take that into consideration, but we may not want to cast it in stone so that we're having troubles with quorum.
Thank you. Councillor Perino?
Thank you, Chair, and certainly agree with Councillor Manley's statements. But I just wanted to ask you a question. Now, my understanding is that you did not have members from nonprofit organizations. Is that correct?
No, we had at least 3 or 4.
You had at least
We did.
3?
They just applied through the normal process, but we had at least 3 groups that were nonprofit, possibly 4.
And it was a very successful thing to have, right?
There's mixed reviews on having that, because what we heard from some people in the community that some of these nonprofits don't represent them.
Okay, so they come with their own agenda?
Yeah, we also heard that the nonprofits have to go by what their board or whatever sets out, so they have to stick to a set regime, so that came up as well. So we had to try and balance that at the meetings.
So if I can just ask you, Chair, so what you're thinking is that that we should not necessarily have 5 members appointed, given the quorum issue, just let them come and apply and see, okay.
That's my belief, but that's
Okay,
just
no,
mine.
no, that's good, thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with the comments of Councillor Brown and also yourself in terms of the numbers, and also the nonprofits, that they should be encouraged to apply, but I don't think there should be a quorum or a quota necessarily. I'm going to mention something else here, if I may, Chair, to Ms. Gurry, through you. And I was going to wait and do this under our next report, under other committees, but when I was thinking about things leading up to this meeting, I wondered if there was an appetite possibly to look at some type of public safety or community safety committee. I'm sure we'll have that discussion, but I wondered if it might fit in as something that worked in conjunction with this committee. And maybe I'm way out to lunch on this, but safety and accessibility to some extent seem to go together to me. And I mention it now because if we wanted to consider that, it, of course, would possibly change the terms of reference for this committee. So I'll mention it now and we can come back to it later, or other people can comment. Thanks.
Councillor Eastmer?
Thank you. I'm not sure if we're at the point of deciding like who's going to be on this committee. I just want to throw out that I am very interested in being part of it. Councillor Thorpe, I think your idea is really interesting. I think the scope of the work that this committee is doing is already quite broad, and I think that discussions around public safety would potentially warrant their own venue to do that. But I appreciate the thought on that. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Oh, Ms. Gurry?
Thank you, Chair. I would just add to those 2 comments. First, when we do bring back a revised terms of reference based on legislation as well as feedback today, at that time, appointments of councillors to the committee will be made. So at the next meeting, I'd say this is like the mid meeting on the committee's conversation. And as to Councillor Thorpe's point about the safety committee as well, I think that if council has well-functioning committees, I think that there's an overlap with all of them. I think that one could look at parts of another, and you would have that interaction and overlap naturally occur. So to Councillor Eastmere's point, they do already have a broad scope, so I don't know if public safety would become part of their terms of reference. That wouldn't be my recommendation, but I could definitely see some parts of accessibility would definitely be safety related, and So I think that there could definitely be things that could be brought to the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness that would have a public safety factor.
Thank you. Mayor Krog?
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair, I just want to say I appreciate Councillor Thorpe's thoughts on this, but just remind everybody it's GPC, it's not the council. So we will have an opportunity to debate, so to speak, or add or change before we get to a final decision on this. So.
Thank
But
you.
it's great stimulus for thought.
I'll just add that we couldn't even get through not even a quarter of our topics, so I wouldn't like to see that added, because I think safety does form part of our decisions when it comes to accessibility, because it is talked about, but to go to the type of public safety that I think that the community is looking for would be a different topic for me. That's just for me. Any other speakers? Councillor Brown? No, we're good. Okay, Ms. Gurry?
Okay, I think we have some more questions. So do you support the purpose and mandate of the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness as outlined on the current terms of reference, which is attachment A? So that is the current, not the proposed, I believe. Ms. Bonicle, could you just confirm that for me, actually? I don't want to be giving them the wrong information.
So, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically the terms of reference as it stands now, we believe is solid, with the exception of needing to alter the membership to meet legislation. And we have a couple things that we are suggesting to add to that, which would come under the next slide. But basically as the purpose is now, if council is happy with that. So that's what we're looking for feedback on.
So just with the changes in the legislation, you didn't have your microphone on, so I couldn't hear you, and I don't think Councillor Brown could either, but I think besides the legislative changes, I think that is the purpose and mandate of the Advisory Committee. Not sure, though, if I heard that.
I do have a question, because I know part of the legislated changes was Indigenous representation.
Yeah.
And with, I'm wondering for us if it should we be looking at going through SFN first, putting that there, or do we go to the community? So that's something I think we need to look at a later date. Perhaps maybe it's something that could be referred to the POG for discussion with the chief.
Yes, I think originally that would be our first, that was our first intention anyways, regardless, though we do need that position filled. So we would, I think we'd take your suggestion under advisement, Chair, and look into that for sure.
Okay. I think we're good to go. There's no, oh, sorry,
Sorry.
Councillor Perino.
Sorry, Chair. I think there's probably only one neutral, and that was probably mine. But the reason why I went that direction was you had said that there was a lot of work being done in the last term, and I wanted to make sure that we gave the committee as much room, as much broadness as possible. So that's why I went neutral. Take on new initiatives if it's so desired.
Okay. Ms. Gurry?
Okay, and I think we have another question. So empowered, do we support expanding the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness mandate to include review city's plan, empowered Nanaimo goals, and identify opportunities to support the related policies? So this could kind of go back to what Councillor Hemmons was saying, I believe.
Everybody in? Nope. Okay, everybody's in, I think. Any discussion? No, not seeing anybody else, I'll start. I think that it should be referred to the committee to make that decision, because once again, I think that might be way too broad for them to take that on. So I think it should be something like I personally liked as needed, that the plans would come forward. Like we had Parks and Recs plan came forward. We had some infrastructure plans came forward as was determined by the staff. And I think to me that would make more sense, because to have to go through all those plans, there's no way we could do it. And I don't think we'd be able to hit the mandate of what some of the committee members would like to see. So for me, I put neutral, because I would like more information around that to see what the time commitment would be. Because like I said, topics were determined by staff as well as the committee, and we didn't even get to what the committee wanted to discuss. So I think it'd be important to hear from the committee as to what their thoughts are. Thank you. Seeing no other questions, Ms. Gurry?
Okay, and I don't, yeah, so working groups. So this was a suggestion from staff as we were working through bringing this report to you. And would you support the concept of working groups being established under the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness? So this, I think, speaks, Chair, to what you were just saying. An example could be an equity, diversity, and inclusion working group to allow for more focus on that topic, which maybe didn't get all of the focus that some desired in the last term. Or it could look at other things like we were just talking about, those plans and that timing. So would you support that going forward? Yes, no, or neutral?
I have a question before I answer that. Would that require, if we went to accessible working groups, would that require staff from corporate services? Because we've already heard that there's a shortage of their availability.
So working groups would not require a recording secretary
Thank
or
you.
corporate
That's
officer
good.
to be there. But just one note to that, it's because the working groups have to come back to the advisory committee with its recommendations, etc. And then the advisory committee would make recommendations to council. So this is a committee of council. So council is the one that determines its work, etc. And the committee just makes recommendations to council. So the working group would have to go to the committee.
Thank you. I think all the votes are in, and I'm going to go to Council Geselbrecht and then Councillor Eastmere.
Through the chair, we're just waiting for one more vote.
Pardon? Oh, waiting for one more vote?
It's just because I have a question.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Eastmere, we'll go to you first, and then Ben, if you wouldn't mind hitting your mic after again.
Thank you. Yes, through you. Who would be on the working group? Is it just members of the committee, like a smaller number of the
Ms. Curry?
Committee members?
Yes. Yes, that's normally who's on the working group. Yeah. So a smaller number of the working group would decide to focus on one item and or initiative, and then on the side as a working group work on it, and then they would bring those ideas back to the table.
It was kind of done informally, like where I know that there was, we had one person that's very, very involved in accessibility for those with wheelchair users, et cetera. And she would sometimes send in her own comments to staff and stuff when we didn't get time. So it was kind of done informally, but I agree with Ms. Scurry, like a formal thing would probably be better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Geselbrecht?
Thanks. Yeah, just you know, thinking like the Committee on Accessibility and Inclusion, trying to get diverse perspectives and provide input into city planning processes and programs from perspectives that may not get you know, the same airtime. That's just, you know, sometimes left out. And so, you know, we want a committee that is not too big, so that's ungangly to operate in. But when you have to narrow it down, you're narrowing the diversity of voices that are available there. So I like the idea of working groups. Potentially that can allow for a bit larger, diverse committee. But again, you run into problems that Councillor Armstrong said around quorum. But then you can have more productive work and focused on the diversity of issues that might exist in these working groups. And of course, the larger you make this, though, the you know, more staff time and effort it does take. But you know, if the goal is to make sure that voices that aren't you know, commonly heard get airtime, maybe this is a way to go. So I do support the working groups, and also not narrowing too much the number of people in the committee, because it necessarily limits sort of the diversity of voices available. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. So just to comment, I voted yes on this because I'm not opposed to the idea of the working groups. Although in general, I'm often not a big fan of subcommittees. Perhaps I should have voted neutral, though, because I feel that this really should be up to the committee, depending on what they see the needs are and how they can best deal with topics. So, you know, I'm not opposed to the idea, but perhaps it should be decided at the committee level. Thanks.
Mr. Rudolph? Oh, left over. Seeing no speakers, Ms. Gurry?
I would just comment to Councillor Thorpe's that of course no working group would be established. It would be the committee establishing the working group, not you folks and or staff. So it was just, do you support the concept? And the working groups would just literally be working groups that would have to bring their work back to the table and not be a quorum of the committee, because they are not a subcommittee. A subcommittee would have to be appointed by council. So it's just strictly a working group, but I hear your point. So I just wanted to say, of course.
Thank you.
Nothing else, Ms. Gurry?
I don't believe there is another question for this one, but I could be surprised. No. So on to the last report. And this, well, there's more than this one, but the last report for this polling and PowerPoint presentation is other committees and task forces. So this report is on page 123 of your agenda, and it's to provide the Governance and Priorities Committee with information regarding other committees and task forces and receive your feedback in order to bring options to council for consideration at a future meeting. So in my report, I outline the difference between a select committee and a standing committee. And in the discussion, I outlined some of our existing committees, such as the Finance and Audit Committee, which would be considered a standing committee under the community charter. And I just wanted to outline the success of that standing committee. I think it's been a great success. Its mandate and purpose is clearly defined, and the items that go to those meetings are very clearly within that mandate. And I think that council as a whole, who are members of that committee, find the committee very useful and in dealing with budget and other financial matters. So I think I just wanted to point out the success in my report of the Finance and Audit Committee. The other standing committee that I would suggest we have is the Governance and Priorities Committee, which again is all of council as members. And there's a separate report that we talked about with that. The Environment Committee is technically still until or unless council does away with that committee and or changes the scope of that committee and or replaces it with another type of committee, it is still in place. That committee gave a great environmental lens to Reimagine Nanaimo and those parts of the city plan. So it was integral to that part of the city plan. And there was feedback at the last meeting, and feedback has been provided here. And I think going forward in the future, when staff come back, that you keep that feedback in mind when deciding whether to continue on with that committee, strike another one, and or dissolve the Environment Committee. Those would be your options that will come forward to you. The Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness, that's another select committee that council has, and we just talked about that. And then one type of engagement and or alternative to a committee that came up at the December 12th Governance and Priorities Committee meeting was quarterly town halls, or e-town halls. And I've outlined that in my report. Could we just move the slides ahead? I'm kind of not going from these slides, I apologize. To the next slide. So in the report, I outlined quarterly town halls or e-town halls, and I think it was Mayor Croak that brought up on December 12th the potential to hold quarterly town hall meetings. Topic could include items like public safety. There could be an additional budgeting e-town hall. There's currently one held in the fall as an engagement session, but perhaps you would like to bring that to the public in the spring. Housing could be a topic, social matters, other emerging issues. These are just some examples. And other formats could be explored as well, like not an e-town hall. As I mentioned earlier at the start of the meeting, that in the spring council will be having another World Cafe style forum with the neighborhood associations. That was done once in 2019 or late 2018. I can't remember exactly, and it was rather successful, and the neighborhood associations really liked it. And so really what I'm here for today, besides talking about this, I want your feedback to see if that's something you would like. And then for other committees, you may wish to consider other committees that align with your strategic priorities that you're going to talk about and what council wants to achieve in your 4-year term. And committees is one of the tools that would be available to you to get engagement and involvement from the public. However, we are noticing that there are other ways in which the public wishes to engage, not so much committees. We do have a little bit of a hard time getting membership for committees, so that's something to consider. Other things to consider when determining whether or not a committee is warranted is going back to the Finance and Audit Committee, where the mandate and purpose of that is so clear and makes perfect sense, and each meeting is structured in such a way that fully complies with that mandate and purpose. So those are just some items to consider. And the next slide might just be the poll question.
I've got a question.
So
just a minute, Ms. Scurry. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hesitant to even bring this up, but the one committee that I was surprised that we didn't have here and that I'm very used to and was by far our most popular committee was our Parks and Recreation. And I was just surprised that we don't seem to have one, because it's one of those ones that the public loves. It's so utilized. I mean, it's...
Yes, so thank you for that. I'm not sure if Mr. Harding's in there. And 6 years ago, if you had asked Mr. Harding, should he give up the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Committee that existed, he would say no way. However, if you were to ask him now, I'm fairly certain he would say that with the Finance and Audit Committee...
We can let him speak to it, Ms. Scurry. He's here.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Harding?
Thank you, Chair. So we had for Councilor Perino's history, we had a Parks, Recreation, and Culture Commission.
Exactly.
So it was a commission, and it was made up because we have many at-large members, but also because we have our the regional district parts of the community pays into our recreation function, and also had members from those areas, which we've now supplemented with another Parks Committee that just meets once or twice a year with the regional representation on that committee. So yeah, it was a very, very active commission, as well as it had a major subcommittee for culture, which was another full different committee that reported to the commission and through to council. So it's really, again, it gets back to Ms. Gray is correct. I didn't know how I could live without the commission, because we did a lot of work, and it was a lot of other subcommittees with it. But since then, because we can come through council in a different way, and people are engaging with council in different ways, it's really how do you want to solicit that kind of participation from the community on those three major big topics, which is parks, recreation, and culture. So.
And so if you just bear with me, Chair, for just one more question, Mr. Harding. So you don't want a committee? You don't?
Well, it's not necessarily, Chair, to Councilor Perino, it's not much what I want. It's how does council want to solicit that kind of feedback from the community? So, I mean, the staff will function anyway. Ms. Scurry is correct that a lot of our issues are on the staff level are dealt with at Finance and Audit, and we'll also bring in groups that we're working with on some joint projects, with fields or boathouses or other those groups will come into Finance and Audit directly to council, whereas before we'd have a couple of members of council on the commission, but then similar to the accessibility inclusiveness, we'd have 2 council members, maybe 3, on the commission, and then the reports would come back on a monthly basis, because it would meet monthly as well. The subcommittees would also meet monthly, so there's a lot of committee work with it. So it's not necessarily what I would want as a general manager. It's really how does the council want to solicit that kind of input from the community.
Boy,
Councillor Manley? Councillor Manley?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would just say that I've heard a lot from the community about arts and culture and wanting an arts and culture committee or the arts and culture community wanting more of a voice. And there's a lot of different asks and different ideas that are coming forward at this time, but maybe having specific town halls on arts and culture issues might be the way to go, or bringing back a commission on parks, recreation, and culture. There's a lot there's a lot of interest in sports tourism here and cultural tourism. These are sectors that we could see a lot of economic activity and growth in. So I would support, engaging the public more in these things if we could.
Councillor Thorpe?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I guess I'm divided on this, and I've often mentioned that I miss the Parks and Recreation Commission and the Culture and Heritage Commission. I think they served a valuable role. But I have come to recognize, as Mr. Harding points out, that I think we've found other ways to allow community input. So it's not something I'm going to be pushing hard to reestablish. But I think there is definitely a role that maybe our GPCs or our town halls could be utilized to provide specific community engagement opportunities in the areas of parks and recreation or culture heritage. So it's certainly an avenue that I want to see the public able to engage with us as much as possible. But I'm being persuaded that reestablishing a committee per se might not be the best route to go. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'm going to add my 2 cents. I agree with the comments of Councillor Manley and Councillor Thorpe. I think there's other ways to get it. I know I went to 2 of the Parks and Recs as the alternate, and we didn't even have quorum. So, no. So I think because there's been other ways that people have been engaged, like we do have a tourism thing, and sports tourism is part of that, so people engage that way. Through the finance and audit, we've seen a lot. I do think one thing that is missing, from my perspective, more is the cultural and arts, and that I hear about that a lot. I don't hear about sports issues, but I certainly hear about arts and culture. No other questions? Ms. Gurry?
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to point out just a little bit of clarification on language. I know Mr. Harding and perhaps Councillor Thorpe were referring to it as the Parks and Recreation Commission, and it might have been called the Commission, but they have a special meaning in the community charter, and they're to dealing with the operation of services and need to be, they manage property and licenses held by the municipality, and their exercise council's authority. So a commission wouldn't be what we would look at. We would look at a committee. I just wanted some clarification on that language. So I think we have some polls now to talk to you about regarding the report. The first question I think we have is diverse membership. So is all of the Governance and Priorities Committee here today supportive of the concept of ensuring diverse membership, including a youth representative, embedded into the terms of reference for select committees? So current and future select committees, yes, no, or neutral. And the results are in, and yes, 67% are in favor, 11% no, and 22% neutral. I'm not sure if you want to have any discussion on
Councillor
that.
Thorpe?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In the brief moments I had to decide here, I struggled a little bit with this because I certainly support diversity on all of our committees, but I'm not sure what I should have asked this prior to vote. What it means to have it embedded, because I struggle sometimes when we say there must be a representative from one group or there must be a representative from another group, and when you go down that road, you're in danger of leaving out various other groups that could want to be represented. So I would prefer to see the diversity looked after by the people making the decisions about who to appoint to the various committees, and keeping certainly that in mind, or top of mind, but not necessarily having it mandated that there must be, as I've said, one person from one group and one from another. And I look, for example, we often reference a youth representative, which is fine, but I rarely see a seniors representative. So why shouldn't they be represented?
It's ageism.
So, that's right.
Yes.
So I hope you get my point. So I was neutral on this.
Most definitely, Councillor Thorpe, through the chair, I think that what we came up with on applications, that we would ask them to self-identify, and we would have a whole bunch of different, do you self-identify as a youth, a senior, et cetera, and go through and try to get as diverse committee and as possible that still meets the mandate and purpose and has a good fit. So just asking for self-identification, I think, is the way to go.
I'll think my other issue that I have, I'm going to speak now, is the fact that who do you consider diverse? Because I just heard Mayor Krogh speak on the weekend, and we have 91 different countries represented at VIU. So does that mean we need to have 91 different, because not all Black communities identify the same, not all Indigenous communities identify the same. So we're opening up a huge can of worms, which is what we saw with the Accessibility and Diversity Committee, that I prefer to have as many people as they want, and they can put down if they are, like, identify as a diverse population or whatever. And then for me, if they're one of the most qualified, they get it, or if there's a tie between a qualified diverse candidate and a non-diverse candidate, then it goes to the non-diverse. But having worked in an environment where I saw women getting promoted when they should not have been, I really struggle with getting a position just because of my gender or I'm diverse. So for me, I did vote no. I think that I think everybody around this table believes in diversity and inclusion, and that's done when we do our selection at the committees. So thank you. Councillor Geselbrecht?
Thanks. Just a question, like a lot of times I find a bit of a bottleneck is just like recruitment. You know, it's like if it's posted online in the newspaper, there's going to be a select people that are going to see it, who are going to apply. And you know, if you're looking to get youth participation, maybe we're not actively getting it because, you know, the particular way that we're reaching out. And so can our policy, if we want to have a certain diverse groups be part of our committees, can we have a policy that may not mandate it per se in the terms of reference, but we mandate that we circulate a request for participation to particular avenues where these particular groups would exist? That's a question.
Thank you. Ms. Gurry?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Councillor Geselbrecht. I think we already do that, Councillor. I think that not only do we use our regular channels like social media, newspaper, on our website, etc., but we also do reach out to, like we've heard already today, we have quite a close relationship with the school district. We have reached out to VIU before. So we do try our hardest to reach out to youth, for example, as well. I think I mentioned at the December 12th meeting that they were engaged with during the Reimagine engagement process, youth were, and they do prefer us coming to them for engagement. So, so well heard, and I think that we would definitely use all engagement methods we could to try to get as diverse applications as we could. I think that's definitely something we could improve upon and always do better.
Target, and just to add on to that, I don't think that, I mean, we've made advancements on our committees. I would say there's still room for improvement, and so I'm open to whatever methods we want to do to try to improve diversity. So if it's in the terms of reference or if it's engagement, it doesn't bother me as long as we're trying something more and different. Thanks.
Mr. Rudolph? Oh, your hand's still up, sorry. Okay, oh, it's off now. Thank you. Ms. Gurry?
Okay, I think we might have another question. Do you support the concept of scheduling quarterly town hall meetings? So these obviously would be subjective to, do you have a topic, an emerging topic, an e-town hall? We could look at other forums that better suit the topic, almost as to what you were speaking to regarding monthly governance and priorities committee meetings. These would be slightly different as they'd be quarterly, and we could look at different topics that you could possibly have a town hall, whether they be e-town hall or another format.
Everybody in?
We're just looking for one more.
Who are we waiting on? Mine's in. Are we in? No? Oh, we got her now.
Well, that's a positive.
Any conversation? Councillor Thorpe?
Yeah, I'll start because I was the no vote, and I don't want to give the impression that I'm against public engagement, but I guess it would really, I hesitated to vote yes on this without knowing exactly what the topic is, what the format would be, and so on. The town halls that we have currently are once a year at our budget time, and quite honestly, I don't find them very effective at all. We have minimal participation. It's a handful of people. We can sometimes predict who they'll be. Very few questions, and to me, I'm not overwhelmed by the success of that format. So if we feel it's a format that would be successful given a certain topic, then fine. But just to have it for the sake of having it, I need to be convinced. Thanks.
Councillor Perino?
Thank you, Chair. I voted yes, and my thought was on particular topics, it could even be an educational piece. So, for example, you know, we talk endlessly about, you know, our hospital, right? We talk about it all the time. Well, why do we need it, and what do we need? And it would be an opportunity to have medical staff who would come and give us some background about what's needed. So I see it as a real positive, and I think we'd get quite an engagement from the community if we did that. I also think that this might be an opportunity to take a look at the safety and security, possibly, that we were talking about. Instead of having another committee, this may be an option to have that instead. But I think it could be a learning opportunity for the public too. You know, we've just gone through a session where we got a lot of emails about the bus terminal. You know, maybe. My first question in my own head was, because as a new councillor, I don't know about all the town hall meetings that might have happened before that discussion became a done deal. So I guess my point is, you know, are we having open meetings where the public is invited and we're helping to educate enough?
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrecht?
I have comments just in general about how we would set up the GPC and the action plans for the Reimagine, and then how we could utilize maybe not town halls, or maybe we can call them round tables for arts and culture, or topics related to those action plans where we can have educational piece and also input from the public. Maybe this isn't the spot, but I just wanted to flag that, and I'll come back to talk about it more in depth maybe once these polls are done.
Mayor Crow?
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I want to compliment through you, Councillor Thorpe, for his courage in taking the position you did. Simply pointing out that something that I have learned in politics, town halls are great when you actually schedule the thing and the topic actually coincides with some public event or outrage or whatever that actually brings people out to speak. Otherwise, I must tell you cynically, one of the reasons you have town halls as a politician historically is so you'll be able to say when people complain about something, well, we had a town hall and you didn't come. And that's generally speaking what happens. I am sure, however, a town hall around the issue of public safety would attract a number of people, and it might be just frankly an opportunity for a lot of people to yell and stomp their feet or express fear, and mercifully, hopefully, offer some real practical solutions that are within our jurisdiction. But that's the reason I voted for town halls, is simply because I think you need to be able to offer that opportunity. But my expectations around the success of them, based on my experience and cynicism, is that unless you happen to strike it at the right time and it gets serendipitous, you're not going to achieve as much as you do. It's rather like elections. You can have two views. People don't turn out because they're satisfied with what you're doing, or they don't turn out because they've given up on you, and I'm never sure entirely which is which.
Thank you. Councillor Hammonds?
Thank you, Chair. I really like the idea of quarterly town halls, and I wonder, we were speaking earlier of giving the public an opportunity to provide input on GPC topics, and I wonder if this might be a more interesting opportunity for the public to say what they want the town hall subject to be, and then that way we could potentially tie into whatever hot button issue is currently on the agenda. Thanks.
For me, I would be, having been at the, and I think most of our previous council was at the public safety rally that was held by the citizens, and there was well over 400 people there. And you don't get work done that way. I'll be pushing for a public safety committee because I chaired it before and it was very successful, and every other community has one and they're very successful. So for me, I don't think public town hall and public safety would accomplish much. I think we need to get a committee back up and running where you can get accomplishments and people do have a voice and they get referred to that committee first, then it comes back. But that's off topic. I'm seeing no other speakers. Ms. Gurry?
I think that's the last poll question and the last of the reports regarding this slide and the polling questions. So just to wrap it up, if you have any more discussion that you'd like to get into, what our plan is to take this feedback that we've heard today, and if you still have some more, we'll take that into consideration as well. Your strategic priorities that you're going to be talking about, and hearing all of that besides what we heard on December 12th too, which we tried to kind of bring forward to today, but we'll take that all into consideration and then bring you back some options. So as soon as possible, as soon as you're done your strategic priorities, we'll bring you back some options based on all of this feedback. And hopefully we've captured what we think you've said, but we're still willing to hear some more. I just think, and what is recommended in the information report, it's just for information, is going forward with any additional committees. I think it's good you have the whole picture of what you wish to accomplish in your 4 years, hearing all of this feedback before you then strike any more committees. So that is just what staff are proposing, but I'm willing to hear anything more you wish to talk about.
Councillor Geselbrecht?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm sure we're going to be having more of this discussion, but I'm just thinking about, utilizing the GPC to be able to address some of the key policy areas that we're needing to in our official community plan, and how, council can help monitor the action plans. And so I just, in my mind, the question to staff is like, we're going to have our strategic planning, and then that is going to inform sort of what our priorities are going to be. And then there's going to be action plans that will be developed from, using the categories, for example, of the official community plan, but what actions will be focused on and what we'll be doing will be informed by what priorities we outline in our strategic planning session. I'm curious if the GPC will be a place where these action plans can be brought forward for council to see, and then that can be an opportunity, depending on the particular category, where we can advertise that for the public to come, one, be educated on what are the actual actions we're doing to make change or to maintain our community. They can be there and provide input on it, and depending on the specific area, we can adjust the format. So for example, like for Arts and Council, if the part of the action plan, I forget what section it is in the OCP, but we've got a set of actions that we can invite the arts community to come during that particular time at a GPC and have some form of like roundtable or town hall where we can get feedback on this and also present what our plan is, and maybe it's multiple sessions. I'm not sure exactly. And the same could be for environment. The environment section, the action plan is presented, individuals can present on it, provide feedback, and then quarterly or maybe annually or every 6 months, there's sort of a report back on what actions have been undertaken, how things are working, so that, if adjustments need to be made. So that way council is sort of updated, we're providing guidance and monitoring of our progress, and there's natural touch points for the different communities of people interested in those areas to come in on the particular format of GPC that we decide. And I'm curious, if that's a way that we could address, instead of having a bunch of different committees on these OCP points, like even an environment committee,
that it can all be sort of integrated into the GPC, make that really functional and coherent with our official community plan, and then have natural touch points for community. Like, you know, there's a whole section on public safety. Maybe that's a big priority for our this council in our strategic planning. So there'll be a lot of action points on it. And then, you know, we have regular GPCs that touch base on that and where we can invite community to provide feedback. Just some thoughts on how, you know, I think we could set it up and avoid having, you know, multiple committees and try to streamline things. Thank you.
That's it. I think you have Ms. Bull-Pulsing's plan completely outlined and articulated really well. That's exactly what I think she was thinking. And to your point, committees and going forward, council's work should align. One should align with the other, should align with the other. So I think alignment and getting your work done and the city plan, I think GPC is exactly what Ms. Bull-Pulsing was thinking would work. And I just see Councillor Brown's. I'm not sure if you see.
Yes, yeah, I was just waiting to call him. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I feel like what I'm going to say is completely contrary to what was just said. I think that gets to my heart of the criticisms around the GPC is trying to push it to do too much, and it's I don't view it as a funneling thing. I view it as the appropriate place to move items that deserve a lot of council deliberation. And I think that's the trap we fell into last term, was trying to funnel far too much through it. And then as a result, you lose that ability to have that more in-depth topic or in-depth conversation on the topics that are either emerging or highly important or require a lot of thought and debate by, you know, having different inputs through staff and other inputs, and then having a lot of dialogue by council. I would almost suggest the opposite, just sort of food for thought, is we've just gone through this huge exercise developing this city plan. It almost makes sense to have like 4 committees based on the goals of that, and then leave the economic stuff to the outside, the agencies and whatever ECDEV function that forms in the city based on some of those budget envelopes. So I just put that out there for a point of conversation. Is it just seems like a natural fit to have committees based on the 5 major sections of the plan, and I think that covers what we do. There's going to be clear action plans that are associated it, and then it just becomes a matter of determining scale, what goes to committee or what goes direct to council, and then from there leave it to council to decide which topics should be or need some more time at the GPC. So I think that it just creates a lot of flexibility and adaptability within the system, puts council in the driver's seat, but also acknowledges that we have this huge plan that has a lot of engagement done. It's going to have action plans and it has a cohesive framework to pull together. So just an idea.
I know, Ms. Gurry, you're not looking for new motions today, right? For new committees,
No,
but I
not
will
today.
tell you that I will be bringing forward one for Public Safety Committee, and it's going to be based on page 33 of our Reimagine Enamo Phase 1 engagement, where the top 3 items that the participants said were homelessness, social challenges such as public drug use and crime, affordability of housing. We don't have anything anything around safety and security, which is the top priorities for our citizens. And if you look at the plan, climate change was number 14, yet we have all these issues, environment committees and stuff, which I agree with. But I am saying, if we follow what our engagement said and what the public asked for, we're not doing it, as well as that's our biggest budget outlet is our emergency services. So just so you know, that will be coming from me at a later date. And we're finished on this now, and we only have one more thing, council representation, so I'll turn that to you, Ms. Gurry. Oh, sorry, Ms. Perino has something.
Well, just a question.
Oh, sorry, you're off. Can you push back on, please? Hang on. Go ahead.
Just a question to you, Chair. So when do you bring that forward? Because I'm also in favor
Well,
of
Ms.
that.
Gurry asked for a later date.
So are we talking months? Are we
Ms.
talking
Gurry?
weeks?
So thank you, Chair, through you to Councillor Perino. So as outlined in the report and the strategy is this is the second meeting out of IC3. I see after your strategic planning sessions and priorities and declaring that we would come back with what we heard from today, which I've clearly heard public safety is on the docket, as well as what we hear in your priorities, because they should all align. And I don't know if Councillor Brown is still here, and I don't mean to flip flop, but when he said his idea of those 4 committees and outlining the city plan, that is more on the line of what Ms. Wolpal saying, and we have been talking about as a staff. So it's a great idea, Councillor Brown. And when Councillor Gesselbrock was talking about it at GPC, that's another way of doing it, of course. But I took his points, and I take your point, Councillor Perino, and yours, Chair Armstrong, for the public safety. So we will be coming back as soon as you're done your strategic priorities.
Thank you,
So
Chair.
I would say,
Thank you.
I would say end of March and or early April. And it could be really soon with the terms of reference for advisory committee on accessibility and inclusiveness, because it's pretty much ready to go and ready to get started again. So that one is happening for sure. We're legislated, so we'll be coming back with that one as soon as possible.
Mayor Krog?
Thank you very much, Chair. Actually, in light of the fact that Ms. Curry is not well today, that it's pretty obvious what the next item is, and it shouldn't take very long. I was actually going to move a motion that Councillor Thorpe be appointed to the Municipal Insurance Association of BC Board, and let's get on with it.
Do we have a
And then
seconder?
coffee.
Seconded by Councillor Perino. All
Through
in
the
favor?
chair, we also need 2 alternates as well.
Well, we'll do this first. Okay, so all in favor for?
Sure. Has he agreed?
Yes, he asked for it. Do we have anybody interested in the alternate? I'll go because I was before. Anybody else? Tyler and Tyler. Or do you have a question, Tyler?
No, sorry. There was no discussion on the first. I know other members of council have expressed interest, and also other members of council don't necessarily have external appointments. So I don't feel we should rush to appoint someone without allowing other people to express whether they're interested and actually have dialogue.
So I guess we've already had the vote, so are we going to have to refuse that, or is it too late, Ms. Snellgrove?
The vote.
Well, I could call a point of order as well, not asking for debate. So
The vote has been taken. Council could make a subsequent motion if the direction was different.
Is there somebody else that wants to nominate somebody else then? Councillor Brown?
well, I know Councillor Gesselbrock had expressed interest. I don't know if he still is, but we just kind of rushed to the decision. So I don't think that's fair to everyone that may have interest.
Chair, if the vote was unanimous, aside from possibly Councillor Brown, somebody on the affirmative side could ask for reconsideration, and we could put the vote back to people that way. I mean, you can do reconsideration right now.
No,
Do you want to, you have to bring a reconsideration then? Is he allowed to just speak, or do we need,
It would be up to the chair.
Yeah, I'll let you speak.
Yeah, no, I appreciate Councillor Brown. I'd been in dialogue with Councillor Brown about interest in this position. I do have a pretty light portfolio of external appointments, but I did not speak to the mayor beforehand about this, and so I can understand that conversation had already been had, and so it's all good. Thank you.
Okay. So we're all okay with everything then? Would you like to go as the alternate?
Sure.
So
I'll move that. I'll move that.
Well, we need one more alternate. Is there another person that's interested?
Well,
I would.
Chair, you were.
Somebody else's, I don't care.
Your name came up as the 2.
Okay, that's fine then. So any further discussion? All in favor?
I think we need a second. Did we have a second? I'm not
Was
sure.
it seconded?
I didn't see a seconder, but
Sorry, yeah. I thought I saw your hand, I'm sorry. So I don't think there's any further business, so motion to adjourn? Moved by Council Perino, seconded by Council Eastmer.
through the chair, could we just clarify the vote for the alternates?
It was 9-0.
Okay, thank you.
As well, you need a procedural motion, not an adjournment, I believe.
So through the chair, we do have question period and then a
sorry.
procedural motion. I don't believe there is anyone here for question period. So a procedural motion would be in order.
That the meeting be closed to the public in order to deal with agenda items under the community charter. Could we have somebody move that motion? Councillor Perino, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All in favor? I forgot we had it in camera. Perhaps now is the time to take a 10-minute break.